Do you think about what type of people you have in your organization, in that department or factory that you want to change? Well, you should, because it seriously affects your project outcome. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel. We'll talk about continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And today's video, it's a bit of a metaphor, something you can really use when you're thinking about how to make sure that your improvement projects or your problem solving or whatever change you make in your organization really gets implemented in a good way. And it's a little story about, well, a bunch of animals on a farm that represent what your organization has as people in it. And this is a little metaphor that I use a lot in training, and since I used it over the last weeks again quite a bit, I thought, it's time I share it with you as well. Hadn't done that yet. So here is the idea. When you look at your organization, there is a number of different sort of characteristics of people in there, and it's good that you can take that into account when planning, who to put in your team, who to specifically take care of early on in how you manage them, how you make sure that the changes or whatever project that you are doing is well received and well embedded in your organization. See, in the end, you need to get everybody along. Now, what do we have here? It is sort of a normal distribution, like a Gauss curve, and that is because these here, the sheep, we have a lot of them. We have quite a number of workhorses and goats, and then a couple of, and this is supposed to be a sheepdog, a shepherd type of dog, or a wolf. Right? Now, what does that mean? How should we think about the people you usually encounter in your organizations? And let's start with that very nice, loyal shepherd dog. They will follow you around. They're up for new things. They're active, playful from time to time, and they will also make sure that the rest of the team is well herded and protected, right? So you know that in your organization you always have a couple of those people that really like being sort of in that front line of change, that like to take other people along, that are a bit more forward thinking. But probably you don't have too many of them, especially if you're in a manufacturing type of environment. You might see them a bit more in the creative professions, but those people you need to guard yourself as well, right? But they are gold to have on your teams. But since there are so few of them, you cannot staff every team with them. They also have their regular job to do. Then a whole bunch of people we can classify sort of as the workhorses, driven to give you performance. They do not decide on the direction so much. They go where guided, but they can move mountains. These, by the way, are great people to have in your project teams. They're willing to do the work. They're willing to go that extra mile, make sure you get your data for the analyses, that stuff is actually implemented, go in there, make sure things are going to be all right. Very, very useful to have. If you encounter these sort of not in your project team, but somewhere else in the organization, in the department where you want to implement the changes, also good. Just make sure that you give them the direction, that they agree on that direction, and they will also there, if they're not directly in your project team, move mountains for you. So that's the workhorses. Then most people, well, they don't really care one way or the other about your project. They sort of behave like sheep, like the big mass of people in your organization. When everybody is sort of adopting that new way of working, they will do that as well. When the dogs and the horses go one way, they'll probably follow that way as well. But don't expect them to champion your change or to really put in the extra effort. No, that is, not something you want to ask of the big masses of your organization. These people can change roles, of course, based on which projects they are, right? But generally what you will find in most factories is that there is quite a large population of people that just want to do their job. And that is absolutely fine. But when it comes to change projects or the new way of working, they don't really care about thinking it up or implementing it. They will follow, just give them the tools, make sure it works, and no problems from them. Then there's also a couple of those people, they are just so stubborn, right? The actual goats in your organization. It is, if you really want to learn how to curse, keep goats. And that is because they will find a way to ruin anything. So it's not so much that they are nasty, evil little creatures. They are inquisitive, they are strong-willed, they have their own mind, and you cannot, capture them. You cannot put them in a small space. They will make sure they get out and do it their way. Now, when you have that in your organization, these generally are people, and that is very important to realize, with a strong heart for the business. They just don't agree with how you are changing it, or maybe they don't readily agree with it. They may have seen a whole bunch of change projects or new management and new systems brought in. Didn't work, at least didn't work in their eyes, so they're not gonna follow along like a couple of dumb sheeps into this new way to ruin the business. That type of behavior can be really disruptive for your project. But the thing is, most of the goat type of stubborn people, they don't do it to ruin your project. They do it because they don't believe in it. And that makes this a super important group. See, most goat type people, they are sort of goats for every project, right? So these are maybe a couple of old labor union people who have always been trying to keep things as they were, but that they are in that labor union does mean that they're actually very invested in the industry and the business and making things right for the people. Or they are just, sort of burned out from all the changes. But the reason that they are burned out is because they were invested in them. If you can identify these people and know that most of the others in the organization already know sort of who they are, then getting them on board with your project, so convincing a stubborn person of the benefits of your new change, taking them along, also taking their feedback into your project, because quite often they have some very, very valid points, and make them sort of a champion. Wow. You see, consider from the point of view of the large masses, right? So the total group of people in your factory. When one of those management loyal dogs is touting the next big change program, yeah, well, they probably did that with the last one as well. But when one of those stubborn pessimists is saying that this new way of working is actually really going to work, wow, right? That has a completely different feel for most of the people. Many of these goat type characters are actually pretty strong informal leaders in your organization. So identify them and get them on board if you can. And then, luckily, a lot fewer than the goats are the wolves, the hyena type of nasty, almost, well, I wouldn't say evil as a person, but for your organization and for the management, they just destroy new projects and initiatives because they like destroying them. Not because they think it's bad for the business, but just out of spite or out of some hatred or envy or whatever reason they have, but they are just, against the change project, against management, against anything that has anything to do with changing the way that they or their colleagues should work, and they come from a very negative point of view. Now, what is the problem with wolves on a farm? They eat your sheep, they scare away the horses, they keep your dogs busy, so they completely mess up anything productive happening on a farm. The same goes for your factory organization. If you have somebody behaving like a wolf and just messing up things for the sake of messing it up, these are not the people that, as a project team, and if you're watching this channel, you are more likely an engineer who leads projects than a manager who leads a full team. That is not your thing to tackle, right? You should know who these people are. So identify a couple of those and just classify most people as sheep for your project. But those wolves, you need to isolate them as soon as possible. Don't go into large discussions with them to try to get them on your side. Doesn't work. It will, well, it can work with the goat type, but it will not work with that wolf type. You need to make sure that they just sort of get isolated from the rest of the group. Force them, right? Almost like a policeman. You need to just force them to do the new way of working, set very strict guidelines, make sure they get, the stuff that they need, the tools, the training, the whatever, but strict guidelines, just this is how we expect you to work. And that is a management role. So that is not something that the project team should be responsible for. In your project, make sure that you keep management aligned, on board, and have these discussions, right? Who should really be directly policed? Now, in all honesty, for an organization, this is just a bad type of characteristic in general. It would be much better to sideline those people out of your business completely, but that is not up to you as an engineer, as a project manager, as a quality specialist, as a whatever, right? Not in those specialist or improvement type of roles. That is something that management hopefully is working on, but even if they're not, you're not going to fix that. But they can make sure that they don't mess up the rest. So when we talk about who would you like to pick for your improvement teams, one goat can be a very nice addition. 2 or 3 will kill your project. So be mindful with this. If you can get early buy-in from sort of a stubborn informal leader, excellent, go for it. The usual way to deal with a couple of them is keep that buy-in, keep them aligned right from the start, but not more than 1 in your project team. The sheep, honestly, sort of ignore them, right? You have a big population of the people that need to implement your change. Maybe you can have 1 on your team. That's not a big problem, but you sort of, if you need them for their expertise, yes, but don't pick them for the work that they're going to do as a project team. So if you really need a laboratory expert, and the guy isn't actually too happy to be per se on project, but he doesn't mind. He's probably not going to do any presentations. He's not going to, but he has the knowledge that you need. Absolutely fine. But pick him because of that, not because you want sheep in your project. Now the workhorses and the shepherds, absolutely. That is the core of who you would like in your project team. And that is also why thinking sort of about this way of characterizing people is a good start to do already when you're sort of selecting team members. And you can have this type of discussions in your management team as well, but definitely have them if you are a continuous improvement manager in your organization. Have these type of discussions with your production managers, with your broader management team, maybe a bit with the training, HR department. So these are good sort of informal discussions to have. And then when you're forming your teams, also do sort of a second check to see, where should I put some attention? Maybe if you have multiple project teams, sort of make sure you divide them nicely over the teams where needed. And especially on this left side, be very aware of it in the target department where you are working right now. Who is just going to sabotage your project because they like to sabotage? And who might be winnable to your side if you give them enough information and involvement up front. But don't go too broad, because most people, they wouldn't care about all that involvement up front. They just want to be trained when it's needed. They just want to know what they have to do and to know that you sort of made everything happen, right? So that is important both in your project team and in the broader organization. The right side of this graph, so the workhorses, the sheepdogs, protect them. Get them in your team, make sure that you give them the protection so that they can do their work. The big mass of sort of following sheep, inform them later. Right? Keep them informed, keep them trained, supply everything they need, don't involve them too much with early ideas. The goats convert them through early good information and involvement. But beware of the wolves. You need to sideline them somehow. Now, this sort of training, well, if you do this as a training, you can do it very interactively with asking people for all of these characteristics. And it is a really nice way to also train your project teams when you do it. But I hope even this video on itself already gave you a couple of nice ideas, gave you a fresh perspective on how to look at your colleagues, maybe the organization, and how the people in your organization, and specifically a couple of character traits, how they make or break your projects. So I hope you like that and will hit that like button. For now, I wish you the best of luck implementing change in your organization. And as always, don't forget to also enjoy the continuous improvement journey.